Man, last episode we spoke about Nas and how he advises us to make the most out of the time we have. He does more than that though in this track, and I will try to tackle it all chronologically in the order that he spits it. The first line that I want to pay attention to is where he says, quote unquote, "My old style is a rough of my new style." And I think there's a lot to unpack from this. Nas explains that his old style, whether that be rapping or anything to do with anything in life really, is a rough of his new style. In essence, what he means is that everything that he's done up until this point, every mistake that he's made, everything that he's tried is setting him up for his current style, or was setting him up for his current style and continues to set him up for his future style. What we learn from the past or from what we've done previously sets us up for the future. If we are able to retrospect, analyze, and understand what we have done, then we will be able to see the direction in which we are heading. Something similar to this is not knowing what we want. Many times we don't know what we want in a spouse or from a career or from many other areas of life. And without trying and wading through masses of mess, we won't be able to know what it is that we want. However, there's a plus side to that, because on that journey, we will figure out what we don't want. I would argue that knowing what we don't want is arguably, I know I said argue twice, more important than knowing what we want. Now hear me out. When we don't know what we want, we've got options, right? We can try many things. So there are unlimited options. Like you can do anything really, trying to find what it is that you want or what will stick. But when you know what you don't want because of your experience, it enables you to hone into your target and not make similar mistakes. Because if, for example, you've been in a relationship and there's a certain personality trait that you just can't tolerate, that you're not compatible with, as soon as you see that in another future potential partner, you will stay away because you know that it's not worth the hassle and you know that you don't want it, saving you time. So when we are able to eliminate things that we don't want, it allows us to hone in and focus more on the target or the destination that we were walking towards. It's important to note, however, that in the moment, we are unable to see this because we might be influenced by emotion, or we might feel a certain pressure or some stress that doesn't allow us to observe the situation objectively. And this is why it's important to retrospect, because when we are in the future, we can look back and see ourselves from a more objective perspective, even if it isn't completely objective. There might still be some subjectivity. However, we are able to see a larger picture and we can see where we went wrong. So we will know how it negatively or positively influenced us, allowing us to understand what is better for us in the future. We can avoid what we don't want, and the things that we liked or the things that were good for us, we can try to increase the concentration of those occurrences moving forward. This reminds me of Steve Jobs' famous quote at his Stanford speech where he says, "You can't connect the dots looking forward, only looking backwards." So once we make some progress, and that's the key word, progress, then we can see our old style and where we went wrong or where we went right, and how we can use it as a rough in developing our new style. There's a quote by Confucius which is related to this, and I'm going to read it out. Quote, "If I'm walking with two other men, each of them will serve as my teacher. I will pick out the good points of the one and imitate them, and the bad points of the other and correct them in myself." And this directly echoes what we're talking about. Now allow me to explain. If you imagine both of these men as being yourself, right? Because you will make good decisions and you will make bad decisions. But of course, we are talking about retrospect. So we're looking backwards, right? So we made good decisions in the past and we made bad decisions. So if we are able to learn from the good we done and imitate them again, and maybe even expand on them and do better, and we are able to, protect ourselves or prevent ourselves from making the same mistakes we made, the bad decisions, then we will be making progress. This kind of reiterates the old saying that goes something along the lines of, "A wise man learns from the mistake of others, only a fool learns from his own." Now, this doesn't mean that Nas is necessarily not learning from other people's mistakes, because he definitely is. And we can see this in his character, because over a period of 30 years, he is one of the few rappers that has almost no negative things around him. Like he hasn't made a lot of the mistakes that other rappers have made or other artists have made. So you can clearly see from his character and through his art that he is a person that learns from the mistakes of others. He pays attention. And of course, he learns from himself. Now, there's another angle that I would like to get at for this, because I think calling someone a fool from learning from their own mistakes is reasonable. However, it goes a bit deeper than that. Now, you learn from the mistakes of others. However, the way I see it is your past self is someone else. You are not the same person today that you were yesterday. So by looking at your own self and your own journey and your own mistakes, you are able to learn from them, because the person you were then is not the same person that you are now. So you're not just a fool. You're not a fool. You are also wise, because you 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 days ago is not the same you today. And I'm sure many of us feel that way. I look back at myself and I think, when I went to university, I was like, yeah, I'm a big man now. I'm 18, I'm 20, I'm doing things. Bro, I didn't know jack. I look back at myself now and I'm like, I knew nothing. I am nowhere near the same person I am today that I was then. I've changed entirely, like so much. And now when I analyze and I look at myself in the past, I can see where I went wrong. I can see what led up until this point, and I can see things from my past that can enable me or allow me to avoid moving forward. As I mentioned earlier, I will try to target this chronologically. And the next line that I want to look at is from his second verse, where he says, and I quote, "The world ain't our home, just temporary, please understand." This alone demonstrates wisdom. How does he know that life is temporary? How does he know this world is temporary? Has he died? Has he gone to the other side? Has he come back? How? Well, he's paying attention. He's listening. He's seeing people around him, people that have passed away. And if we look at what we spoke about last time about making the most out of time, you look at the people around you who have passed away or who haven't made the most out of their time and who are lagging behind, you can see that there is something going on. So you look at them and you learn. He understands that it's temporary, because how is it home when it doesn't last forever? And the word temporary itself means around for a limited time or lasting for a limited time. So if we are only here for a limited time, then it's temporary. So what's going on? That should make you think. That should make you realize that this is limited. It's not going to last forever. It's going to end. It's temporary. So in your temporary presence, what can you do? Nas says, please understand. It's like he's pleading to us. Well, he's saying please, so yeah, he's pleading. But why? Why is it? Why is it so important that he wants us to understand this? And I think that's where you can see how serious it is, because a man who's almost 50, he's been through it all, he's seen it, and he's letting us know as his listeners. He says on this album that he wants 16-year-old fans, 30-year-old fans, 60, 50-year-old fans. Like, he's talking to all of us. There's an element of this that says it's never too late, because if it's temporary when you're 16, then it's still temporary when you're 50. In a perfect world, sure, the 16-year-old has more time, but how many 50, 60-year-olds go on to make a large impact compared to young people who just waste away their days? So he's talking to all of us, and he's pleading us to understand, because he's been there and he's seen it. He's reaped the rewards of making the most out of the time he has. And I'm sure along the way, he's had moments where he's not been performing optimally. Nas, in his own way, then goes on to give us some key things that we need for making the most out of this limited time, out of this temporary existence. He says in one of the lines that follows, "Respect and balance, human dignity, that's the perspective." It makes me wonder why he chose those words in particular, but also in that order. There's also an element of personal growth in there, because he says that's the perspective, indicating a shift in his own perspective, because now that's the perspective. What was the perspective before? So by living and by experiencing and growing, he's able to offer us a new perspective based on his own experience. The first one being respect. By respecting one another, we can live in harmony, pretty much. And respect itself is defined as some form of admiration or due regard. So if we have due regard for one another, at the very least, we don't have to admire one another. But even if we admire one another, then we will be able to live in a way where we are in a certain form of harmony. The next one is balance. And I think this is the most important one because balance is everything. There's a universal balance. Everything is in an equilibrium. Whether you look at it from a philosophical or a physical or a religious, a spiritual perspective, in every single way, there is a balance. I can talk about balance for a very long time, but I'll keep it brief. I'll try to summarize in this video. Balance applies to everything. What goes in must come out. What goes up must come down. Day turns to night, night turns to day. You got hot, you got cold. Yeah, some will argue that no, there isn't such thing as cold, blah, 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 all of that crap. But in essence, there is a balance in everything. We mentioned Confucius earlier, but if we go even before him into the starting times of Taoism, or Taoism if you like, there is a very famous symbol that we're all familiar with, the yin and yang symbol. Now, the yin and yang symbol, for those who are listening, is the circular symbol with what looks like two, how can I say this, maybe like two shooting stars following each other, one's black, one's white, with the opposite colors dot in the other. But the purpose of this symbol is to signify balance. It is balance. There is no point in that circle where one is completely dominant over the other. They balance each other out. Where yin is more, yang is less. Where yang is more, yang is less. And in both cases, at the largest part, there is always a little bit of the other one in there. And this signifies balance. And there are some principles to yin and yang, which I'll explain. The first is that together they form a whole. If you look closely at the symbol, there isn't a point where one dominates over the other. The next is that they are in complete harmony at all times. It's also a principle that they are never static. They are constantly moving. And if you look at the symbol, it looks like they are constantly chasing one another, or they are revolving around one another. I'd like to also add that the only thing or something that can disrupt the harmony or the balance in yin-yang is an external factor. However, when we look at things from a bird's eye perspective, we can see that in general and universally, there is a balance, an equilibrium. We can also go ahead and talk about Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. People that believe in the Big Bang believe in the Big Crunch. Energy can't be made or destroyed, it can only be converted. But without digressing too much into philosophy or physics, I just wanted to give some examples of balance. I've preached balance for as long as I've been aware of it for myself, because I realize that good days don't last and neither do the bad days. And when we look at our human lives, we realize that all of us carry trauma, and ultimately, human existence is tragic. We are all living tragedies. Like, our lives are very tragic. And it makes me think about all the oppression and the unfairness in this life. And how, for example, if one person oppresses 100, well, how can you ever get justice for that? A few years in jail? One life for 100? It doesn't balance out. And to me, this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest proof, in my opinion, in my perspective, for an afterlife, because there has to be some sort of balance restored. But I digress. The point is, there's a universal balance in both the physical world and arguably in the metaphysical. We are the ones that unbalance things for ourselves. We have goals, we have expectations, we have things that we want to achieve. But without a balance, we won't be able to do that. An example of this is someone who wants to be a scholar or knowledgeable in a certain area. They are only going to get in knowledge the amount of work or study they put in. What you put in is what you get. This is where the balance comes from. Nas pretty much tells us to have a fulfilling experience in this thing called life, we need a balance. In his 49 years of living, Nas is telling us respect, balance, and human dignity is the key to a fulfilling life. I'm not sure exactly what he means by human dignity, but in my understanding, it's to be dignified, simply put. And with dignity being defined as the state or quality of being worthy, honored, or esteemed, it seems fair that it's highly ranked. It ties back into respect, because not only do we have to give respect, but we have to earn it. And to earn it, we must be dignified. So dignity leads to respect. And respect is earned through dignity. So there's a balance in the middle. So respect, balance, and dignity. This is how much of a genius this guy is. He just created an equilibrium in his own bars. Man, this guy really knows how to structure a bar. And this is why we talk about Nas, and this is why we look at bars. Just from, I read out 3 bars, and look at how much content, or how much we've spoken about, just 3 bars. So imagine the rest of them, or the rest of his discography. There's so much to unpack, and there's so much to learn from these people. And that's the purpose of these videos. So thanks for tuning in. I think I'll do a part 3 sometime in the future, because there's a lot more to discuss from this track. But once again, thanks for tuning in. Do the whole like, subscribe thing. I don't know which way I'm pointing, if it's right or wrong. But if you're listening on the podcast, check out the website, check out the YouTube. If you're on YouTube, check out the podcast. And thanks again, and I'll see you guys in the next one in a bit.